This and every episode of REKT Podcast is brought to you by Beaxy Exchange, an upcoming cryptocurrency exchange built in collaboration with OneMarket Data. Beaxy is bringing legacy finance speed, power, and sophistication to crypto for the first time. With 225,000 transactions per second per pair, comparable to NASDAQ, 15 order types on day one, with 25 order types on full rollout, and a dedicated customer support team, Beaxy is setting itself apart from the competition. Check out Beaxy today at Beaxy.com and pre-register today at Beaxy.com/registration to get your free Beaxy Exchange tokens. That's Beaxy.com, BEAXY.com.
I'm Bruce Fenton, and this is REKT.
Hello and welcome to REKT Podcast. I am Bunchu alongside my esteemed colleagues and co-hosts, Crypto Chamber. Chamber, how are you, buddy?
It's a good day today in Canada. They just opened. I just spent most of the afternoon waiting in line to get into the first brick and mortar cannabis stores. So it's I have to show solidarity for my kinfolk. Here in
You're the only one I know. You're the only one I know that would wait in line for.
There was.
How are they opening on April 1st? They should be opening on the 20th.
Well, honestly, I agree. Two things. I thought it was interesting. It may have been a sting operation by the local police department having a. Yeah, exactly. But no, it was totally legit. But yeah, no, I was literally waiting. There's 100 people waiting in line all day at every given point. They were bringing people in about half a dozen at a time.
That's crazy.
Yeah, waited about hour and a half.
But Cynthia, how are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. Just normal. Yeah, good.
We have a very special guest with us this evening, Bruce Fenton. Bruce, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Wonderful. So we are super excited to have you. For those who may not know Bruce is the CEO and founder of Atlantic Financial, Chainstone Labs. He was part of the Satoshi Roundtable and is on the board of Medici Ventures. So we are very glad to have you here to chat with us today. So let's get right into it. Bruce, we always ask our guests how they kind of got into crypto, where they were before this crazy journey, and how they got to where they are today.
Sure. So where I was before this crazy journey was I've been in the investment business basically my whole life. My mom was a stockbroker starting when I was a little kid, so I got my first job as an assistant to the stockbrokers when I was about 14, and I got my first investment license when I was 19, and I had that license for 18 years or so, but then after that became a registered investment advisor and have worked with all kinds of customers from very, very poor people in some of the poorest countries, working on poverty initiatives to kind of doing financial planning for regular American investors, all the way up to advising some of the wealthiest decabillionaires and large pools of money in the world. So I was always interested in emerging markets and the emerging economy, and this sort of crypto space combined a couple of the things that I was really interested in, free markets and economics and technology. So I got into crypto. I got first started hearing about it around 2012, and I got into it full time by 2013. And in that period since then, I've done a lot of stuff, invested, worked on a lot of different projects, and had a lot of fun, a lot of adventures.
So what was it that drew you to crypto?
Originally, it was probably speculation, but what got me really interested in it was the convergence of kind of this sort of decentralized idea that you don't need, this is Bitcoin originally, that you don't need government to run money for you. And as somebody who has always been interested in free market economics and small government, limited government, that was really interesting to me. And then after I got after I started with speculation, then I started learning more, and I became more appreciative of a lot of these other things that make it cool, these kind of other things that that work around the decentralization and the security and the way that it works. And then after that, there became a lot of other uses for this technology, I think.
So I've heard some of the things you've talked about before in relation to specifically securities tokens, and I kind of want to get into that a little today. Can you just tell our audience, maybe who isn't familiar, what a security token would be and what is it?
Sure. So the best way to answer that is a security. First of all, we want to define what a security is. Security means different things in different places. In the United States, it's defined by the Securities Act of 1933 and other rules, which basically say kind of anything that relates to a stock, bond, evidence of indebtedness, all of these other terms. Basically, if you were to summarize all that into one simple word or phrase, it would be something like a tradable agreement. Okay, so it's basically an agreement that says that two parties have terms. It could be we're going to share revenue, we're going to share equity, something like that, and then they have this agreement, and then you can trade the agreement. You can sell the agreement to somebody else, or you can sell a piece of the agreement to somebody else. That's what a security is, basically. And those have been around for hundreds of years, and they've built the foundation of the entire global economy. Every kind of company or venture that you can think of is somehow either a security directly, in the case of Apple, Facebook, Tesla, Google, and many other things, or it's usually related to a security. So securities are a big deal. The second part is tokenized. That will be maybe even more familiar to many of your viewers or listeners. That tokenized basically means you're taking the ledger and you're putting it on a distributed ledger like a blockchain, and then the shares become, or the shares or whatever security it is, become digital, and they're digitally tradable. So you're basically trying to take these agreements and make them move as easily as something like a Bitcoin or an Ethereum could move.
So what is, the main difference? I think I've heard you say that, that these digital securities are different than, what we would think of as a typical cryptocurrency, correct?
Yeah, for sure. Cryptocurrencies are valued different ways. So if it's truly a currency, a crypto, like a real cryptocurrency, like Bitcoin is probably the best example of is definitely a cryptocurrency, then currencies are valued differently than securities. Currencies are based on the scarcity, the durability, the fungibility, how much it's accepted. These kind of things are what define the value of currencies. But securities are defined by the terms of that agreement. The terms of the agreement are what matter. So if you have an agreement from the board of directors of Apple that says this token or this piece of paper represents 10% of our company, well, that's worth billions of dollars. If you have an agreement that says, hey, give us this money and you don't get anything, which is kind of what the agreement you had with many ICOs, that may not be a good agreement. So it's really just the value of the agreement. Doesn't mean securities are good or bad, but they're just valued differently. Same with currencies. Most currencies are bad. Some are good, some are bad, but you look at them differently. It's apples to oranges.
So you mentioned, ICOs. So how would one kind of valuate a security token versus something like an ICO where we don't, like you said, there is no real agreement, you're just kind of purchasing essentially or we've seen it with utility tokens and things like that. So it seems to me that you would be able to kind of value a security token a little more accurately, I guess, based on there's obviously people have been evaluating securities for years and years and years. Is that accurate?
Yeah, for sure. The good news is with securities is that it's a field that's been around for really centuries, but it's been around in its modern form for decades. There's books that are 50 years old that are still very accurate about how to analyze securities, because agreements are agreements, and in the modern world, just as 50 years ago is kind of the modern world, you value these things based on the terms of the agreement, which are pretty straightforward. First of all, Is it a company? Do they have revenue? How much money are you going to make? What is this agreement worth in terms of dollars? And those things are pretty straightforward with how to analyze them. There's a lot of experts. Pretty much any chartered financial analyst or a whole bunch of other people would be able to analyze almost any token. Just because it's a token doesn't really change the way that the security is valued. It may a little bit, but you can definitely put a valuation on these things by using standard security analysis tools.
So, why do you think blockchain is the right way to go for the future of these securities? What makes blockchain the way to go there?
Well, the interesting thing is it really comes down to the ledger, the way the ledgers work. And the way that securities ledgers work now are typically two ways. For small companies, startups, and that means, even many that are tens of millions of dollars and hundreds or even thousands of employees, those companies typically keep track of the ledger of who owns what. They keep it themselves, or maybe they work with a couple of their key venture capitalists or something. So they pretty much keep that ledger on a Excel spreadsheet. And that's okay, but it doesn't enable them to trade it around the world very much. It doesn't enable the shares to move very easily. It's kind of clunky. The other type of ways that shares and securities currently trade is through these huge public markets. And in those cases, the ledger is run by these big, giant centralized organizations like the DTC and Euroclear. And the reason these organizations exist is basically because all of these brokers all around the world don't trust each other to tell the other one what the ledger is. So Merrill Lynch is not going to tell Charles Schwab, hey, here's how many shares of Apple our customers own, and here's how it settled out at the end of the day. By the way, about 30, 40 years ago, they used to settle these shares at the end of the day with bicycles. They'd kind of drive around to the firms and settle it. It's probably more like 50 years ago that became a real problem, and there was a lot of scaling and capacity issues in the late 60s that related to this. So anyway, because of that, all of these brokers got together and trusted a third party, DTC in the United States' case, and Euroclear and other agencies outside of the United States, because you had this issue. So what a blockchain does, it solves that ledger issue for both cases. It solves it for small companies. It solves it for larger companies that are trading on public markets. And the way it solves it is that neither of those companies need to worry about what's true. They don't need to manage who owns what. Just like I can own a Bitcoin and I don't need to know how many Bitcoin you own or whether you really own them or not to know what mine is worth. And you can very, very, very easily prove to me how much Bitcoin you own if you needed to, if we had a vote or something like that. And that's the way we're trying to go with tokenized securities. They won't quite trade as easily, or hopefully they'll trade as easily as Bitcoin, but there's a lot of clunky things that sort of need to be attached to it around identity and things like that. Some of them are for compliance reasons, and hopefully we can work on solutions that comply with the law that are also very sort of cypherpunk and free. But some of them are not legal solutions. The legal solutions are almost easier to solve. Worst case, you could try and change the law, but there's a lot of ways to comply with the law and do it in a way that's less clunky. But the harder thing to sort of decentralize away are some of the control issues that issuers want to have around securities that relate to identity, because it's not easy to move identity around with crypto, and I wouldn't really want to. In a perfect world, we'd have stocks move just like Bitcoin can move, but that wouldn't be perfect for issuers because they need to know sort of who owns their shares and that kind of thing. So there's some issues to solve with it, but the big benefit overall is that you're not relying on a trusted third party for the ledger. You're allowing the blockchain to be the ledger. And the reason that's cool is because when the blockchain is the ledger, you can move securities all over the world. There's a reason that right now, if you're American, it's very difficult to buy securities from Africa or Japan, anywhere in Asia, really anywhere in the world other than America. And the same goes for them. Investors in China or Saudi Arabia have a very difficult time buying shares in American companies. And the markets close at the end of the day, and there's all kinds of slowness and things like that relate back to these way that it was set up back in the 50s. So a blockchain can improve a lot of that and make it so that we have this much bigger market, hopefully of thousands or even tens of thousands of securities that we can trade all over the world and access and unlock a lot of capital.
Yeah, so then in theory, one of the big benefits as an investor would be you would have access to way more potential investments than you would at the current way the industry is run, correct?
Yeah, hopefully you'll have access to more investments, and capital will just move around the world more. It'll be easier to take exposure to things. I would like to invest in Syria, but it's very difficult to invest in Syria. There's a lot of different areas, and if it's easier for people to invest around the world, it unlocks capital. The invention of the first stock unlocked a lot of capital. It was the Dutch East India Company. Before that, you used to have kind of one investor, one shipping expedition, and somebody invented a stock, the first publicly traded stock, and they made a new way to do it better. That's the way that I view this technology. You take the same sort of businesses, but if you unlock the way that they can get capital, then you can have a lot more investors, and you may own $100 worth of your favorite sandwich shop. I mean, everybody has a favorite restaurant in town. Why don't you own a little bit of equity? Why not? The owner would probably like it. You'd probably like it. The reason you don't is because it's a big pain. It's not practical for an owner to manage a ledger, especially for small investments like $100. It's much more effective if you have these, to make it worthwhile for something like a small business. Usually it's got to be, 10 grand, 50 grand, 100 grand or more. But if you have a decentralized ledger, you could have it trading in a much easier way. So it's both the opportunity for the entrepreneurs and the business owners from small all the way to very large, and it's an opportunity for investors ranging from individuals but also investment pools. People, mutual funds and professional investors will be able to invest in a wider variety of investments.
Chamber, are you confused yet?
Oh no, very, very, very confused. No, I actually had a couple of questions. First, you said I wasn't sure if you said you wanted to invest in Syria or invest in the securities within Syria. Are we longing Syria right now? Is that what we're doing?
Well, I mean, that's just me personally. It's not something I'm recommending. But when something is on its way to recovery, that typically is a good investment. That's something I learned from Jim Rogers, who is a great investor. He traveled around the world and did all kinds of cool things. He co-founded the Quantum Fund with George Soros. There's a couple old videos. I've met him. He's not really what I'd call a friend, but I've met him a few times over the years and gotten advice from him. There's a couple videos online of me talking to him years ago, and he predicted a lot of things. But anyway, that's just one example. To be able to take an investment like that, it would be very, very difficult, even for me as a professional investor, to try and have the infrastructure to go over to Syria. And it's not something I would. It's not like a major corporate strategy. We're not going to put $20 million in Syria, right. But as an individual in an individual portfolio, it might be interesting for people to be able to have exposure like that.
And you're saying to an individual country.
Yeah, individual country. You can get more granular on your investments. You can go to individual countries, individual industries, and the reverse works too. So you could have your local pizza house that you invest in because it's your favorite place and you think it's great and you want to support the owner. So maybe you buy $100 worth of stock, but maybe there's a Chinese billionaire who's building a portfolio of United States pizza houses because he wants to compete with Pizza Hut, and maybe he invests $10,000 in the pizza business, and maybe then his portfolio becomes worth $1 billion, and then he supports it and has a plan. Those are the kind of cool things that you can do with capital. It's just everything's owned by somebody. They're already securities. If you look out your window, if you're in a city, everything you see is a security. All the buildings are owned typically by corporations. That's a form of security. All the businesses are absolutely corporations, and that's a form of security. And that ranges from the smallest businesses in your town to the largest businesses in the world. They're all securities. And if we unlocked that and made it so we could trade all of them, then it's good for the owners, it's good for the people who are advising and investing, it's good for the people in a community, and you can diversify who owns what, because it's very difficult. A lot of value is locked up in these big buildings, so to speak, or big organizations that it doesn't move around easily, and a better ledger will help important step in making it so that it moves around the world easier.
I'm really interested in this pizza investing strategy.
Good.
So what about, you mentioned a little bit about what are the big hurdles with regulation when it comes to this. We're still kind of in this wild west when it comes to, ICOs and KYC, and obviously it's kind of going that way. What are the big risks or what are the things we need from a regulation standpoint to, really make this happen?
Yeah, the regulations are often misunderstood. A lot of people don't really understand, securities and utility tokens and that kind of thing. It's becoming more clear. The SEC has been, I think, very clear in their explanations, and it's pretty consistent with what we thought and what a lot of the attorneys and other experts that we listen to think. And that's basically that a security is a security. It's been defined by these laws for 85 years in the United States. You can look it up, and it is what it is. That's not going to change. That law is extremely unlikely to change because for the simple fact that there's trillions of dollars in capital that rely on it, and the laws that have been around for 85 years aren't going to change just because Bitcoin and its friends come along. So the law is what it is. And many of the laws, by the way, are actually, even for me as a very low government kind of person, many of the laws are actually pretty good laws. They protect things like your property and your shareholder rights and these kind of things. So securities are what they are, and they're here. And those laws are existing in the United States, and the SEC is going to continue to enforce those laws. And to try and go around them and pretend that something's a utility when it's really a security is a very flawed strategy, because it is what it is. Same with being an activist and saying, oh, forget it, we're going to ignore the regulators, we're just going to do whatever we want because we're cypherpunks and freedom, rah rah. That's not a good.
Viva la revolution,
Yeah, it's not a good strategy either. It would be the equivalent. You mentioned the weed shop. It would be the equivalent of saying, I'm going to open a weed shop in a state where it's illegal. Because, forget you. That's not a good activist. That's a person who's going to go to jail. It's a bad activist. The good activist would push to change the law. And the second part of your question that you asked is, what parts of the law would we change? The biggest thing that I would do is get rid of the accredited investor laws. Now, those are pretty, like the securities laws, they're part of the securities laws, and so therefore they're pretty hard to get rid of. But they are newer than some of the other rules, and there's been a lot piled on with, especially with AML KYC, which is much newer. That's more like 90s and even post 9/11, where that increased further. Even when I started in the industry, there was no real AML KYC. You could open an account over the phone just with your voice. You didn't even need to give your ID. You didn't even need to sign it.
Really?
You could just tell them. Yeah, I mean, and it's strange that we as a society have gotten so used to this AML that we think it's some sort of birthright of government. Like, oh, boy, of course, we've got to have AML KYC. And the truth is, well, why? Why? Who says? It's not a good law. It doesn't protect the people. There's no victim. Have you ever heard anyone in the history of the world say that, oh man, my life was ruined because of AML KYC? Are there grannies who are going to the state regulators saying, hey, you got to do something about this AML KYC? Are there entrepreneurs who are asking for it? Nobody cares about AML KYC. There's no public will whatsoever to have AML KYC. The only reason for AML KYC is so that the IRS can help you get your get their cut. They want to get your taxes. And so people kind of grudgingly accept it. But, let's not pretend that it's about saving the world or stopping, horrible crimes or terrorism or something like that. The truth is it doesn't, and it hasn't. And the laws are a real crippling effect on the way that capital is formed, which is the whole purpose of capital markets, to have the formation of capital. So the accredited investor laws are, in my opinion, terrible. We ought to get rid of them. And if we can't get rid of them, like I said, it is very hard to get rid of them. Maybe we could loosen them up quite a bit. Maybe you could make them more easy to self-certify. Maybe make it easier for, lower the limits, something like that. That would be one thing I'd do.
What would restrict? Now, obviously, I hear a lot of commercials for apps you can get on your phone where you can buy stock in Apple and this and that. What are the accredited investment laws prohibiting people from doing? So is it a certain amount? Obviously, this is in the U.S.
Yeah. So the accredited investor, it's mainly about it's for the companies who are raising money, basically. If you want to raise money in the United States, and that money is through a security, which, by the way, is a lot of things. Security is a very broad thing, particularly if you're doing something like raising a token for your startup. That's almost always going to be considered a security. So if you're raising money for a business enterprise, that falls under the definition of security, you have two ways to do it. You can either be what's called registered, which means you register with the SEC and say, hey, we're offering a security, here's how much, fill out a ton of paperwork, spend well over $1 million. Or you do what's called an exemption. You say, okay, we're not going to be publicly traded, we're not going to fill all this paperwork, but in exchange, the SEC will let you do it if you fall under one of these exemptions. There's 9 or so major exemptions: Reg D, Reg A, Reg A+, 50, whatever, this and that. And each one has a little bit different rules. Most of those exemptions say, hey, you're allowed to raise money for your security as long as the investors are accredited.
Okay.
So that means that the investors have to have a certain net worth. They have to have income of a certain amount. They have to have a net worth of a certain amount.
Is that number about 200,000, 250,000?
It's about 200,000 in income, $1 million. There's quite a few different. A lot of people aren't aware of this. There's actually different. It's not as cut and dry as it seems. There's certain investment professionals. If you have an investment fund with over 5 million, there's different things like that. But in general, and it's also up to a firm. Most firms will say something like 200,000, 250, and $1 million. And then some will count liquid, non-liquid, exclude. Right. A lot of times the home is excluded, like in the United States, for example.
Gotcha.
But anyway, what the problem with this is that if you raise under the exemptions, the security can only be sold to other accredited investors during a certain period of time. And so from a token standpoint, that's very clunky, because you can't trade a token like you could trade a Monero, because you're going to have if the law says that it's got to be accredited, well, that adds a whole bunch of new stuff on it that says, well, if it's got to be accredited, that means somebody somewhere needs a database that says, here's this person's name, here's the security or token that they own, and here's this signed thing from somebody or some proof that says that here's what their net worth is. Well, that's a problem, because that means you need a centralized database, which is the whole thing we're trying to avoid. Mm-hmm. So there's some tricks around that, and there's some clever ways where you might be able to have your cake and eat it too, but that's a problem that needs to be solved.
Yeah, so then in theory, if those laws aren't tightened up, at least in the U.S., that would restrict, pretty much most of the consumer market, correct?
For those exempt offerings. If you have something that's fully registered, then, which is one thing that's really interesting to me, then no. Like, for example, Apple is a security, but you do not need to be accredited to buy Apple. Anybody can buy Apple. That's what you mentioned about the apps. So that's because that's a listed security. Now, it's expensive to become a listed security like Apple, and it's very difficult once you do it. You're looking at least $1 million to set up, and $1 million a year, probably closer to $1.5 million or more. Apple, obviously, as a huge company, spends many multiples of that, probably tens and tens of millions that they have to spend on compliance just to comply with the rules to be public. And that's another thing that would be nice to get rid of. I mean, why does it cost $1 million? I mean, that's just something I find that offensive as a capitalist and a stockbroker and somebody who's been governed by the SEC in some form for 27 years. I find it offensive that I call my lawyers and say, hey, I want to go public. Well, it's $1 million. Well, why? Who the heck says it's $1 million? That's crazy. Everybody should be able to buy what they want. And by the way, the markets would work a lot better if they did. This illusion that regulations are going to protect us is false. Regulations do not protect us. Bernie Madoff was the head of the main regulator. Let's not forget that. Bernie Madoff was the head of the main regulator. They've kind of scrubbed that from his bio a little bit, but with a couple extra clicks, you can find that. So
and now he
regulations
wants to run for president.
Regulations do not work. Yeah. Well, they both, Bernie Madoff and Bernie Sanders have something in common. They both steal out of your pocket.
Oh, no.
That's funny. So, backtracking to the actual technology a little bit. When these securities are going to be built now on their tokens, what's your opinion on how they're going to be built? Will they, kind of how we see now, each security might choose a different blockchain to build on and things like that?
Yeah, I think blockchains will end up being kind of like jurisdictions, just like securities now. Some of them set up in Delaware. Some are now choosing Wyoming. Some choose the Cayman Islands. I think it'll be the same. Some securities are going to choose Ethereum. Some are going to choose Bitcoin. Some are going to choose something else. And there's a lot of platforms out there that are working on this. Tokens is a big thing. Security tokens a very big thing. So there's a lot of protocols that are trying to work on this because they recognize the potential. So I think it'll be like jurisdictions. I think issuers will decide, say, hey, here's what the benefits and drawbacks. Each chain has strengths and weaknesses. There isn't any that I consider to be, well, there's chains that are very strong. There isn't any sort of overall solution and protocol that I consider to be perfect at this stage. I like some, but there's nothing that's perfect. It's going to be a little while before anything has all the solutions. And even then, there'll probably be multiple. Hopefully, there'll be multiple that are not perfect, but they sort of solve everything you'd need. And I would predict that, and this is very hard space to predict in, but I would predict that if this thing works, there will be multiple chains, not thousands, but several major chains that do slightly different things for different issuers.
And then, if they are kind of treated and SAWs as jurisdictions, that would kind of play into how they're valuated, correct? I mean, that would kind of be another metric to value them on?
Yeah, and that's one thing that that securities analysis of the future will have to look at. How is the strength of the chain? Just like they have to look at how the strength of the jurisdiction is now. If I have two tech companies that both do 10 million in sales, they both have the same patents. One is domiciled in Switzerland or San Francisco, and the other one is domiciled in Nigeria. The one in Nigeria is going to trade at a discount because of their legal structure. That jurisdiction is a terrible, terrible jurisdiction. You can't even open up bank accounts, whereas San Francisco or Switzerland are very good jurisdictions. So there would be a huge premium between those. There might be a slightly less premium if it's something like the United States and Canada, but there's a little bit more from the United States and Mexico, for example. So I think we would see that, and it depends on the issuers and how the things are valued. Somebody who is doing something that really needs a lot of scalability, they may take trade-offs and issue it on EOS and say, okay, EOS has some trade-offs, but they're very scalable. Somebody who puts security first and decentralization where they really, really need it totally uncensorable, and they say, okay, this is, maybe it's some kind of security from a jurisdiction that has a major nation state that's an enemy, or, some kind of, like if WikiLeaks wanted to do a security offering for their stock, they'd probably want to use the Bitcoin chain because then it can't be censored, at least certainly not very easily. So there's going to be strengths and weaknesses of different chains for different projects.
So what exactly are you doing with Chainstone Labs? How does that play into everything?
Well, I do a lot of interesting things with it. The most well-known is the events that we do, some of these Satoshi Roundtables and things. We're kind of quiet about what we do, but we have been working very, very seriously in the securities token space longer than I think anyone, and investing and planning and doing a lot very, very strategically with a very long-term plan, and I think it's coming together quite well. And there will be more and more of that revealed as time goes on, but some of the public things are things like the events and my work on the boards of Medici and T0, part of the Overstock family, and then some of the things that Chainstone are doing with very much regulated securities advisory work. We're working on an app and a lot of things that relate to kind of investment advisory services. The other thing that we're going to be doing is helping, because I was a FINRA member. My FINRA license is not active right now, but I was a FINRA member for 18 years. So another thing we're going to be doing is helping startups who are doing things with tokenized securities who've suddenly found themselves in need of regulatory help and licenses. We can help people get licensed. We can consult startups, help them get their license, help them get in compliance with the rules, and do the things that they need to do to get a FINRA license. We know how to do that, so we could direct somebody in the right way. So those are some of the things that we're going to be working on in the future, and none of these things are live. Most of them aren't really live or sort of consumer focused right now. A lot of it is sort of behind the scenes investing and that kind of thing that we've been focused on.
Talk a little bit about the Satoshi Roundtable. It seems like a pretty awesome event. Chamber, you're not allowed. You're not invited.
No, I haven't. I'm waiting for my invitation, but I have not seen it.
No.
Yeah, the Roundtable is great. The original idea was to have something a little less chaotic, sort of an introverts conference, something focused more on high signal to noise ratio, keeping it kind of a little bit more quiet. And it's gotten, sometimes, for better or worse, sort of this reputation of being very exclusive, and that's because a lot of great folks have come, but it's not designed to be exclusionary. It's just limited in space. The whole purpose is to have it be small, and given the number of people that come who are a big draw, if we just opened up tickets, we'd have 2,000 people. It'd be like consensus, and then I'd have to do a new conference. Say, okay, let me make a small one again. And if anything, we like it even smaller. The popularity of the roundtable has made it grow quite a bit, so it's almost getting a little hard to manage, and we try and keep it small. And the big thing all the attendees say is, hey, I want it a little smaller next year. And so what we've done is created some mini roundtables. We just had one about a week ago, and it's topics specific. So this one was focused on securities tokens and digital securities, which is my thing. So it was really great, and it was very easy to get a very good group of people. We only had about 30, 40 people, and we did it right in New Hampshire, which for our company is a much easier logistics thing than going to, the Caribbean or something with 500 people. So it was very nice, very high end, very good food. Just sort of, I try and design it to be something that I would like to attend. And the team and my wife and everybody else who works on it, we've gotten pretty good at it now. This is our 9th event. We've done 5 big round tables, 1 mini round table, and then 3 other little events. Well, let's say more than that maybe. We did 2 we did the Dubai Bitcoin Conference, and then we did 2 New Hampshire conferences called the Free State Digital Assets Conference. So yeah, 9 events total, I think. And we've learned a little bit about it, and we just try and do something that we would like, because I'm about work first. I'm not in the conference business. We don't do these to make money. Right. We don't even have sponsors. I mean, eventually we should. I don't promote too much the fact that we don't have sponsors, because I don't want it to sound like a nonprofit. I would have sponsors. I just don't have time to go chase them, and I don't have a salesperson on our team who is going to bother with that. The main value, and what's much more valuable to us than sponsorships, is just getting together with people and learning. I've gotten to do some very, very good investments and had a lot of luck in this space because of knowledge, and it's not because of me being smart, it's because of me hanging around with people who are smart. So I try and hang around with as many smart people as I can, as much as I can. And if I can host an event, then it's even better, because I get to pick the smart people that are there, invite people, encourage people to come. We all learn from each other, and that format's worked pretty well. People tend to like it, and they want to come back. I think this little one that we just did last week was one of our most successful events. I bet you, we don't have our surveys back yet, but I bet you our satisfaction on that is even higher than the big round table. I loved it, and I think the attendees loved it, because it's just sort of small, work group focused, everybody talking about the same topic. You're talking about very specific things. How do we do this? How do we work? It's like, and you're getting knowledge from some of the best experts. So I like it. And we have some really cool property up in New Hampshire that we have access to. There's a big resort. There's a big farm. There's campgrounds. There's all kinds of cool things that we can do.
Is this the Bohemian Grove of of crypto? This sounds awesome.
Yeah, I'd call it more like the Crypto Shire.
Yeah,
we're going to try and create something cool up here in New Hampshire. New Hampshire's the free state. Live free or die is the motto. And we chose it because it's got proximity to Boston and MIT, Harvard, everything. It's got a huge crypto community up here. There's a bunch of Dash developers, a bunch of Bitcoin Cash. There's a bunch of people who come from the tech beltway down in Boston, which is only less than an hour away. And it's a great spot. You got the ocean. It's cool. We're in kind of cool, sort of town that a lot of young people like, and so it's a great crypto community, and we've got access to this cool farm and cool resort that we can bring people up to and just learn. And
the bags are packed.
Yeah. Well, with the mini roundtables, we'll have I always feel bad because a lot of people get mad at me because they can't get into the regular roundtable. So this will be a way to get more people in, because with the mini roundtables, like this one was funny. We had just about 40 seats, and it was, we had like 44 confirm, but I know I confirmed extra on purpose because I knew a few would cancel, and I said, well, if everybody shows up, I'll just have my staff stand in the back, or I'll skip my meal. I can skip my steak and give somebody else my stake. That usually doesn't happen. We've done enough events that we know that somebody's gonna. So it ended up being like perfect, and I think that we could do that for these. We're gonna do a Bitcoin focused one, hopefully in the summer, and then the next one will be more like free market, and then I'm gonna try and spread the word. Maybe this will be partly done right now by talking on your show, but I want to spread the word to people in different communities, whether it's Ethereum Classic, EOS, ADA, Bitcoin, offshoots of Bitcoin, RSK, Liquid, whatever. I want to spread the word that most of these folks I know, and hopefully they'll come to our events, but I also want to spread the word like, hey, if you want to do something, I'll help you do an event. Maybe once we get our goal is to do a few this year, do 3 mini roundtables, and if it works, but judging by the first one it will, maybe next year we do 10. So almost every month you got some different topic. You got the EOS mini roundtable, and then the next month you've got the Ethereum mini roundtable. You got a couple Bitcoin ones, and maybe a overall open source, not Bitcoin, maybe a couple securities tokens, whatever. I think that's a good format that people learn and appreciate. And again, we're not in the events business. This is just an ancillary thing we do to try and learn ourselves. So, we'll just see how it unfolds. Maybe we end up doing just a couple a year, but if it works, we could do more.
Sure. One more question about the securities market. Actually, I guess two. When do you see this kind of all coming to fruition in a big way? I mean, it sounds like it's starting to now, but obviously there's still tons that needs to happen before it really gets going. When do you think we see something like this take really big hold?
It's quite exciting because my thought coming out of the securities mini roundtable was simultaneously, wow, this is bigger and faster moving than I ever thought, and even faster than I know. And that's a pretty bold statement because I've been talking about this for years, since before almost anyone, and I've been very, very, very bullish on it, but I'm really seeing it now. There is more investment in this than there was in the entire Bitcoin and blockchain space around 2013 and 14, maybe even 15. I mean, wow. The level of money and the serious players that are coming into this tokenized securities thing is amazing. So that's the one thing. The other thing is rolling up your sleeves and getting into these nitty-gritty of these conversations. It's stunning how little we know and how early we are. I self-assess myself as a pretty good expert on this topic, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface of what I know. And I think that the people in the room there, I think if you were to say, top 20 experts on the topic in the world, I mean, we might have had 15 or 18 of them there, and the other people might have been sort of top 50, top 100 as well. And that's partly because it's a new field. There's not that many people doing it, but we did have, major developers, major CEOs, people who know as much or more about it than I do, and that's unusual for me. There's just I have this unusual life where I've been doing securities a long time and doing Bitcoin a long time. Just by nature of the time, I should have some pretty good knowledge about it, especially having focused on it. But there's a lot of people like that now, and there's a lot of people with a lot of depth, and that's really interesting. So that part of it makes me say, like, wow, yes, we've come far. Yes, it's huge, but my goodness, there's whole problems we haven't even thought of yet. But the good news is there's enough machines behind it. There's 4 or 5 people that have this thing that I alluded to when I was talking about AML, kind of making it more decentralized and kind of having your cake and eat it too, making it more cypherpunk so money or securities can move around more easily, but you can still comply with the law. And there's 4 or 5 groups working about the same sort of solution for that, which is kind of a wallet-based solution where your wallet knows who you are, but the security doesn't. So the security or coin can move all over freely like a Monero can, but only when it gets to your wallet does it know who you are. Now, that's the last mile of that is a very difficult thing to do.
Right.
And the best and brightest minds in the world are working on it in 5 different ways, 5 different projects. But it will get solved, and I think a lot of these things will be solved. And I really predict that, 10 years from now, that's where you want to look at. 10 years from now, I think that the whole world will be completely different. It'll be like this will do for securities what smartphones have done for computing. We have computers in our pocket. I mean, it's so crazy now. It sounds so plain that it sounds silly to say I have a computer in my pocket. Everybody's like, yeah, we know. Like, of course. I remember the last time, Apple had that line for years when you'd go into the Apple store and you look at the iPad and they'd say, yeah, it's like a mini computer. And somebody said that to me like 5 years ago, and I kind of looked up like, really? Like, you don't think I know that? But now, 5 years, even as little as 5 years later, nobody would say, even to a child, you wouldn't pull out the new iPhone and say, wow, this is like a computer. Everybody knows it's like a computer. But 10 years ago, it didn't even exist. So that's the way that I think this is going to be. I think in 10 years, people aren't even going to remember the old world of securities. It's just going to be really cool. You're going to look on your phone, and you may have thousands of securities, and you're going to have exposure to all different kinds of things. And the world's just going to work different. A lot of things people won't notice unless they're in the investment business, if they're a stockbroker or a fund manager, a hedge fund manager, portfolio pension manager, something like that. But the end users will notice some of it, and the world will change a lot, the back end will change a lot, and there'll be a lot more capital unlocked, and hopefully that'll create a whole new growth for the global economy like nothing else we've seen before.
Very cool. Very cool. Chamber, you in?
I'm in. It's funny you say that about the kids and the iPads, and we take it for granted. This Sunday, my family, I got two daughters. One's 5 years old, and both my wife and I forgot. Like, we got in the car, we started driving, and my wife's like, "Oh shit, I forgot my phone." And I go to check mine, and I actually forgot my phone too. So we both forgot our phones.
What?
I know,
it's the weirdest thing I've ever heard.
The craziest thing that's ever happened. So my daughter wanted to go to a cafe for breakfast. She wanted to have like a hot chocolate or a muffin. So we're like, screw it, we're gonna go. I said, 15 years ago, this was not a problem. And she's like, and my daughter looked at us. She's like, neither of you have a phone? She's like, what are we gonna do? And I said, it's perfectly fine. I said, we're gonna make it through. And within like a minute, I asked my wife to Shazam a song on the radio, and I'm like, oh yeah, shit, we don't have our phones. But we made it. We made it about 2 hours. Actually, maybe a little bit more than that. Maybe like 3 hours, no phones. So I was pretty happy.
Good for you.
That's pretty good.
That's a long time, especially with kids.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Yeah.
But my daughter was
All right.
my daughter was beside herself. She's like, I don't know how we're supposed to live without our phones.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I'm so addicted to my damn phone, it's impossible. But anyway, all right, Bruce, thank you so much for that. That was awesome conversation. So I hope everybody out there took a little away from that. But now in true REKT podcast fashion, we are going to have some fun. So right here on your Twitter, it says that you are a comic nerd, comic geek. So we're going to draft. We like to do these drafts on here. We're going to draft our favorite superheroes of all time. So we have we're going into the superhero draft here. The draft order is going to be Bruce, Chamber, myself, Cynthia, and we'll go in snake order. We're going to pick 3 each. So, Bruce, you are on the clock.
Oh, I'm first?
Yeah.
One overall pick.
You get the 101.
And what's the purpose? To be the most powerful?
So
we...
Go ahead. I was going to say. What we'll do is we will then take our teams. We will post them tomorrow.
Okay.
And we will let Twitter kind of figure out, by using a poll, we'll let Twitter be the decider of who's the winner. I am historically very, very poor at these, and I would say the guest usually wins these more often than not.
All right.
So you're
and can it be heroes and villains?
Could be heroes,
yeah,
could be
sure,
whatever you
absolutely.
want to do.
All right. So I'll say...
Oh, villains too?
Well,
yeah,
one of them is he's kind of neutral, but he's really powerful. A lot of people don't know him, but geeks will know him. That's Molecule Man. Molecule Man. You know how Professor how Magneto can control metal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Molecule Man can control molecules.
That's messed up.
that is pretty powerful.
So
that is
Wait, is
quite
it bad
the
that
power.
I've never heard of Molecule Man?
Well, they kind of wrote him out of the comic books. They wrote him out of the comic books once they realized that it didn't work because he could just
he's too powerful.
do everything.
Right.
So Molecule Man.
Yeah. Whose universe is this? Is DC?
Professor X I'll go with.
Wait. You only go one at a time.
Oh, sorry.
No.
Somebody's going to take somebody.
Yeah,
I hope
don't
nobody
give it
heard what
away.
I said there. It might have been a ruse. I might have just thrown out some name that you thought you heard just to throw you
Psychological
off, so
warfare.
that you don't know that you're about to lose.
All right, Chamber, you're keeping tabs of these.
For the
right?
record,
So
I know I'm about to lose. And just out of
you're on the clock.
curiosity, Molecule Man is from DC or Marvel or
He's from Marvel.
Marvel. Okay. Well, I'm not going with Molecule Man. Obviously, I'm gonna go with. I think I'm gonna go with. I think Superman. I think I'm gonna go with Superman, the Man of Steel.
Good choice.
I gotta win one of these. I am notoriously bad at these, so I'm gonna try to play to the crowd.
Good. Superman might have been my next. That was a good one.
Okay, so my turn, and then Cynthia, you go twice.
Yes,
I'm
I
gonna
do.
go with. I don't know. I'm gonna go with Wolverine.
Damn you! That was mine.
I'm going with
I
Wolverine.
knew he'd never make it past the first draft.
Damn you.
In every
All right,
game,
Cynthia.
from every childhood playground to every adult in the world, Wolverine's always picked first.
Yes, he's great. So Cynthia, you have two in a row now.
Son of a bitch, you took my number one. Okay, my two are Thor.
Ooh,
Ooh,
you're just going on hotness, aren't you?
Well, kind of, yes, but not really. And Iron Man.
Ooh,
Oh, good one.
that's a good one.
Good one. Good one. All right, now it's back to me. I think I don't want to pick this one, but I feel like I have to for voting purposes. I'm going with Spider-Man. So Wolverine and Spider-Man for my first two. Chamber, you are on
Are you
the
kidding
clock.
me? You're leaving me with Batman? I will take Batman and Superman and get. I think I'm winning this one for sure.
All right, Bruce, you have back-to-back picks to round out your draft.
Wow! All right. Well, nobody got Professor X, so I might as well get
No,
him.
I felt I needed to give it to you.
Yeah, but I really wanted Superman for my third. But so instead of Superman, I'm gonna go with another oddball one, like I did Molecule Man. I'm gonna
Yeah.
pick the Beyonder.
The Beyond.
I don't even know who that is.
Nobody does. The Beyonder in like 1984, a series called Secret Wars. All the superheroes in the Marvel Universe got teleported to a planet by this super all-powerful being who kicked all their butts, and his name was the Beyonder.
That's
I'm
fantastic.
down with
So-
teleportation.
All
We
right,
got to
so-
go to win on this thing. It's all about strategy. So we got two real powerful beings and Professor X.
So you may need to editorialize your draft tomorrow when we post
Yeah,
this. 'cause I bet
definitely
you
need to
most
win
people
the vote.
No.
I don't need to explain nothing to nobody.
So your final team is Molecule Man, Professor X, and the Beyonder.
Yeah, Beyonder.
People have they can do one of two things. They can say, "Oh, let me use Google on the internet machine," or they can do the smart thing and just say, "This is Bruce Fenton. I'm going to trust what he says." Trust,
Exactly.
don't
He
verify.
knows what he's talking about.
I like it.
That's fantastic. All right, Chamber, you are on the clock for your last pick here.
Can I pick like a group?
No.
No, okay. Because I really like.
Negative.
Can I pick five?
Yeah, can I pick like just 7 people at a time? I pick all of the X-Men.
The DC universe.
Okay, I'm gonna go because what I really wanted to do. I've probably mentioned this 100 times already, but I'm a big fan of Teen Titans Go. So I would take all of that group.
Teen Titans.
I'm a big
The
fan.
Raven is on Teen Titans.
That's
Go.
what I'm saying.
would
I
recommend
think-
the Raven.
I think.
Raven is very good. Highly recommend Raven.
Well, you know what? As an homage to my favorite television show currently, I will go with Raven from Teen Titans.
Wow.
I'm going to vote
All
for
right.
you.
Nice.
All right, so I'm just going with the vote here. What I think will be popular enough to win me this. I'm going with Deadpool as
Ooh, nice.
my last.
I'm going to lose
Oh,
this
that
poll.
is a good one. You're gonna lose. Nobody
Here
knows
I was
who your
thinking about how to
characters
win in a strategy of like battle, but it's really Twitter that I was gaming for. So
Yeah.
I'm probably gonna.
They're all dumb on Twitter.
Should have known better. Well, you guys can have the likes, but if there's a global apocalypse, My guys
You're winning,
are going to be all right. So
I think
you
Molecule
can
Man
enjoy
takes
your
it.
likes from your bomb shelter.
I don't know if there's Wi-Fi down there.
It may not work.
Right. All right, Cynthia. Oh, you have one
Yeah,
more?
she has one more.
Yeah, I have one more.
All right.
Okay, my last one. I got to put a woman in there. Okay.
Oh,
Catwoman.
yeah, for
Nice.
sure.
Catwoman.
Catwoman.
Catwoman over Wonder Woman. Interesting.
Yeah, no, Catwoman is like
She's the
kind
original
of
woman.
bad. She's sneaky, you know. Like I like that she kind of has a bad side.
If I would have picked a woman, I would have gone with like Jessica Jones. I think because I watched that show on Netflix like not too long ago. And she's kind of badass. So, all right, what are the final results here,
Okay.
Chamber? You got them?
So we got Bruce coming in with Molecule Man, Professor X, and the Beyonder.
The ones that nobody
I'm
Solid.
looking up both Molecule Man and the Beyonder after
The
this.
comic book geeks though are going to vote for him. For
Yeah,
sure.
they're going to come in droves. I have Superman, Batman, and Raven. Bunch,
My team is so good.
you got a good team, Bunch. You got Wolverine, Spider-Man, and Deadpool.
Yeah, that's a win.
And not to be outdone, Cynthia's coming in with Thor, Iron Man, and Catwoman.
That's not bad either.
This is a
Not bad
very,
either.
very, very good team. If they put them all together in one big team, it would really be quite epic.
Yeah.
Bruce, what do you have? What do you have behind you? Is that Batman?
Yes, this is Batman here, and then that's my art thing. That's Captain America's shield. This is a
That's cool.
I've got I don't know what this is, some kind of toy. Oh, Fallout, that's what that is. Yeah, the Batman's pretty
Awesome.
cool though.
Very cool.
That is very cool.
This should have been one that we like live streamed.
Yeah, we
because
should have.
it's
But this
background.
We
was
can't figure that out.
But
It's beyond us.
we hit the jackpot on that one. We were like, oh, what can we do fun with Bruce? We're like, all right, superhero draft.
I like it. It was fun.
That's awesome. But that's going to do it for us. Bruce, we want to give you the floor to just kind of mention anything else that you want to work, that you're working on, anything you want to talk about. How can people find you, everything like that?
Well, save the world. The environment is important, and you can find me on Twitter.
Awesome. Is it just at
Twitter,
Bruce
Bruce
Fenton?
Fenton. Yes.
Yep, at Bruce Fenton. Perfect. That's going to do it for us. Bruce, we really appreciate it. That was a lot of fun. Great conversation. And that's it for us. So
For
until
sure.
next time,
All right.
don't get wrecked, and that is financial advice.